Do you find you can't get enough spooky goodness? Then by Jove, you need to check out the Generally Spooky Patreon. For the princely sum of £4 a month, you can enjoy our main episodes a whole day earlier than the general public. If that doesn't float your boat, you can become an £8 a month spooky trooper. You'll get the main episodes early and access to 12 extra Patreon exclusive episodes, with more to come. The episode that really tickles my pickle is about Private Wojtek, a brown bear that served in World War II. As a top draw £12 a month Spookmaster General, you'll be on Cloud 9 with access to our Wee Blether series. In it, my darling wife and I debrief episodes, play games, and chitter-chatter about our goings-on. You'll also become a member of the Spooky Book Club, where Eilidh is currently reading us Peter Pan, having just finished Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Simply marvellous. Did I mention you also get 10% off our quality merchandise if you join? You bet your bacon you do. So come join us. Get your peepers over to patreon.com/generally spooky and support your favourite rapscallions. Tally-ho!
The Skylark Bell, an award-winning serial fiction podcast by Melissa Oliveri, now in its 3rd season. Follow Magpie and Lucas from small-town America to a remote Scottish island as they attempt to solve the mystery of the mythical Skylark Bell. This podcast is for lovers of ghost stories, time travel, Celtic lore, the unexplained, and the supernatural. Find the Skylark Bell on your preferred podcast platform and at theskylarkbell.com.
It's like we never left.
Wait a second. We've been here before.
I know your face.
I know your face from half an hour ago when we were last sitting here recording. Hello again.
Hello.
Welcome back. Again, I'm assuming this isn't your first episode, because this is going to be part 3 of Inveraray Castle.
We are the Generally Spooky Podcast.
And Clan Campbell. And from that, I assume you know we are the Generally Spooky Podcast. Ooh, I'm Eilidh, I know everything.
I know the name of the podcast we both run.
I know what's up.
That's Kieran bitching.
Yeah.
I'm Eilidh, who he's bitching about.
Yes, that's the podcast, pretty much. We bitch about each other while we talk about history.
But we do it in public, there's no secrets, and that makes it fine.
I feel like I'm getting incriminated here.
It's better than bitching behind your back. I'd much rather you bitch about me to my face.
Well, that's true. That's a very good point. Anyway.
We are actually all fine. We haven't had an argument in the past half hour. This is just how we are with each other.
That would be awkward.
I wonder if people forget sometimes that we're married.
Can you forget?
Well, because we don't talk about me and you a lot, really.
Well, I hope people don't think we're siblings. We're not that historically accurate.
That's sick, Kieran.
I know.
Jesus.
I know.
Jesus.
It's every earl throughout history you need to tell. It's not my fault. I didn't marry my stepsister.
Thank God.
Only someone from last episode did.
300 years ago.
Have you checked out the La Belle Rebelle merch?
You should. It's great.
It's awesome. I'm no longer wearing the hat because the sun's out. But it's still awesome, though.
Would you believe the sun's out in the north of Scotland?
I know. It's absolutely roasting, which means it's about 14 degrees Celsius.
Roasting.
Absolute roaster of a day. Check out the merch, link in the description, or go to generallyspooky.com, and it's on the homepage.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to support us. We get a couple of pounds for any piece of merch that you buy. It's great, and we genuinely think you're going to like the La Belle Rebelle stuff, because we do.
Yeah, we are utterly delighted with it. So you should check it out. And if you want a no-cost way to support the podcast, you can subscribe to us on your podcast player, and you can leave us a review either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
I'm not sure if you can review on Spotify. It's a bit tricky. I think you can rate on Spotify.
Yes.
But reviews are hard.
Yes.
I don't think you can leave them there.
You can rate us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Or you can just listen and enjoy.
We also have a whole bunch of stuff over on Patreon. but you heard the ad for that already.
Yeah, that weird radio guy.
We cannot shake him.
Oh, it's following us around.
It's like a stalker.
Like a bad smell.
Like a Victorian era stalker.
Wait, or does that smell me?
Probably a safe bet. You had eggs for breakfast.
I think we've gotten off topic here.
Okay, so here's the story. I'm allergic to eggs, but only kind of. And that's what this episode is going to be about. We're going to break that down to figure out why I can't eat eggs.
Can't we talk about the Campbells of Inveraray?
You don't want to hear about that.
I want to hear about that. I had to wait a whole week last week, and I've had to wait like an hour today, and it's simply too long.
I mean, I could finish the story if you really want me to.
I do. We are with Archibald X and the Jacobites.
And it's easier to remember when we've just recorded it, eh?
Yes, it is.
Yes, we left last week at the Campbells' involvement in the Glencoe massacre, which we didn't get fully into because we have a whole episode on that. If you're interested, give it a listen. Highly recommend. It's a very somber episode, I think. It's very moving, which we talked about last week.
Yes, we did. So, where are we? What's happening? I wonder how many Archibalds do we have to get through over the next 300-ish years?
Who knows?
You, hopefully.
Not me.
Oh, no.
I thought you were prepared.
I'm never prepared.
You have your notebook in your lap.
I do. I'm ready to write down stuff for the blether this time.
Okay, well, you're right. We left things with Archibald X, who was the chief of Clan Campbell when the Glencoe massacre happened. He was in charge of the regiment that were ordered to take part in the massacre in 1692.
Colonel-Chief.
Yes, Colonel-in-Chief.
Colonel-in-Chief.
And we've talked about the nuance of the Glencoe massacre before, that although the Campbells made up a large portion of the regiment, it wasn't just them, and they were acting on orders. But if you want to know more about it, go listen to the episode, it'll do it more justice. We're not really covering that here.
It's a good one.
Only because we've done it already.
Been there, done that.
Archibald X married a woman called Elizabeth Tollemache. 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 Tollemache.
I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to let you sit in it.
They had 4 children together.
Only 4?
What do you mean only 4?
Well, someone else had like 12.
4 is still a lot of children, Kieran, and don't you forget it. 4 children, and then in 1701, Archibald was made the first Duke of Argyll.
Interesting.
So he got an upgrade.
Oh, so he's the first Duke of all of them, as he said, the first Duke of Argyll, but you know what I mean.
No one had held that title before.
Thank you.
It hadn't been recreated like the Earl of Atholl. He was the first ever Duke of Argyll.
Fair play.
But he was only a Duke for 2 years, because he died in 1703.
Ooh.
Having regained his family's wealth and land, because like I said, he went to King William and Queen Mary after sucking up to James VII didn't work. He went to them and they restored what he felt was his rightful property to him.
Ah, the sucking up to him. That's the lip service. I see.
You're filthy.
I'm in the know.
This is why this isn't a family-friendly podcast. You are the reason. You are not family-friendly.
I'm not family-friendly now.
I'm sure in his mind, Archibald did not too bad, but the Glencoe massacre is a pretty nasty stain on his record. And like we said, the Campbells' reputation never really came back. There's still a couple of pubs down near Glencoe that still have signs up saying no Campbells and things like that. Obviously, they're not honoured now, but it is something that's lingered.
Yes.
That you can't trust a Campbell. And I'm pretty sure the name Campbell comes from the Gaelic that means like twisted mouth or twisted words.
Oh,
yeah. So it's something that's hung around like a bad smell.
It's not come from where the bells camped, as I suggested in part 1.
No.
Oh.
No. The second Duke was Archibald X's son, John.
John?
John.
You can't just change it up after 400 years of Archibald and Colin. You can't just come in here with a wild card and call him John.
You probably should change it after that many Archibalds and Collins, because neither of them are very nice names.
No.
I don't think. Who would name a baby Colin?
Colin. I've less problem with Colin than...
An adult Colin, yes.
Yeah.
A wee baby Colin.
Colin McRae, the only Colin.
Colin McRae was a rally driver.
He was indeed.
I had the PlayStation 1 Colin McRae game.
Did you?
That I shared with my dad. I don't think he ever played it. He just wanted it because it was a rally game.
Quite right.
John was an army man, much like his father, and led troops against the Jacobite Rising in 1715. So I hinted at that last time.
Yes.
So the Campbells are very firmly against the Stuarts. They support William and Mary. That's how they've gotten their name. John's father had been a huge supporter of William and Mary. Mm-hmm. So when the Jacobites were trying to bring back a Stuart monarchy, the Campbells were against it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we know from talking about it in past episodes that the Campbells were pretty famously against the Jacobites.
Yes.
For once, John was a titled army man who actually saw action.
Well.
And did the job that he was glorified for.
Oh my God.
He was on the battlefield and he actually led troops.
All right.
So he didn't just pay his way to rank. However, he was given the rank of colonel because his dad spoke to King William. So he got him the foot in the door.
But then he ran with it?
He did actually fight with his men, and he did lead men in battle.
I can respect that.
That hasn't happened every time we've talked about it.
Nope. I can get behind that. I like it.
Question.
John and the Privy Council, are they related?
You're dying to tell me why they might be. Your face is trembling with anticipation. He started sweating, you guys.
I have not started sweating. I'm not trembling either. There's just a toilet joke to be made, and I'm here to make it.
You have the floor.
No, that's it. I'm just going to allude to it. Keep the audience wanting,
Okay, you have your techniques and tactics, and I have mine. To how we keep people interested in this podcast that we love to do.
Mm-hmm. Keep them wanting the John, so to speak.
Alrighty,
Roo.
John was instrumental in the 1707 Act of Union, which brought Scotland and England together into Great Britain.
Got you.
So before now, the union of the crowns had meant that the king, it was always a king, but king or queen would be king or queen of Scotland and England. Mm-hmm. This brought them together into one country, so to speak.
Yep.
John flip-flopped in and out of favour with Queen Anne, who came after William and Mary, and then with King George I, like they've all done up until now. I'm your pal, now I'm not. Does it serve me? No, it doesn't. I've decided it does. Okay, maybe you do better. Now I hate you.
Sounds exhausting.
Swings and roundabouts. Mm-hmm. John was married twice. Just like all his ancestors, apparently, so many of the Campbell men married twice because their first wife died.
That's true.
Very common. Mm-hmm. But he and his wives only had daughters.
Oh, but what are they going to do? None of these daughters have penises, Eilidh.
Oh, good grief. Whatever will they do?
How will they take charge? What will they waggle at the enemy?
Maybe that's really what I'm trying to do with this podcast. Maybe this is me waggling it at the enemy. Be like, look at me, no penis here, doing just fine.
You're doing just fine.
One of John's daughters was Lady Mary Coke, so named because she married Edward Coke, who was a viscount down in England. And it's spelt like Coke, C-O-K-E. Turns out that titles don't make you a good person.
No.
Shock horror, I know.
That is appalling news.
He abandoned Mary completely on their wedding night, and then basically held her captive at his family estate.
Ew.
She wasn't allowed to leave.
Scumbag.
But she had to stay married to him. But he hated her.
Well, if that's not the worst, I don't know what is.
Right? She never used the title she gained through her marriage to him, because he was a viscount, and, quote, refused to have sex with him, unquote, in retaliation for his treatment of her, which I feel is the least he deserved. That should just be a given.
Yeah, Rightly so, but it might just be all she could do, I guess.
Oh, I understand she couldn't do more, but, it's the very least that should have happened to him.
Absolutely.
Things got so bad between them that lawyers became involved. And remember, this is the 1700s.
Yep.
So I know it seems obvious now, but back then this was not just a done thing. Mm-hmm. Lawyers became involved and they agreed that Lady Mary had to be released. So she was being held captive on the estate. She was not allowed to leave. She was not allowed to see her family. Nothing like that. Extremely abusive.
Grim.
She had to be released and she was then allowed to live with her mother instead of being held by her husband. But she wasn't allowed to divorce him.
Ooh.
So they had to stay married, but they were living completely apart. And she was now safe with her family, so to speak.
Well, that's good. I mean, for how badly it normally goes, we can take this as good news.
Yes, I think it's probably as good as it could have gone.
Yes. So, I've already lost track. Who was she?
She was John's daughter.
Okay.
One of John's daughters.
Yep.
What's nice is that she spent the rest of her life, Mary, reveling in her independence. She travelled a lot, she wrote, she had fun, and just generally had the best time without the shackles of her husband.
Without the shackles of Mr. Biscuit.
Mm-hmm. She just had a great time, didn't miss him, lived a full life. So that made me much happier.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
John died in 1743 and is actually buried in Westminster Abbey.
Oh, wow.
I would be willing to bet that no one I spoke to or asked would be able to tell me who John Campbell was.
No.
But he's buried in Westminster Abbey.
Oh. I don't think I know many people who are buried in there, to be fair.
Isn't that wild?
That is
It's
wild.
one of the most well-known buildings in London. Mm-hmm. One of the most well-known religious buildings, at least in Britain. And I couldn't have told you who that was.
No. And even for all the details some of the other characters of this tale have gotten, doesn't sound like he did that much. He was in a few battles.
Oh, it's an army man.
Yeah. Did some army stuff.
Politician.
Crazy.
It just doesn't seem right. There's also a street named after him in the West End of London.
Oh, yeah.
Argyle Street.
Oh.
I don't really know London. Maybe you do if you're listening. But Argyle Street in the West End is named after John Campbell.
Well, there you go.
The second Duke.
The second Duke of Argyle
Yes.
Street.
It was also John Campbell that had an architect design a new Inveraray castle.
It is the time. Mm-hmm. We've got to the 1700s.
Yes, as promised.
Yep, it's time for all the castles to get gentrified.
Mm-hmm. He felt that the existing one wasn't grand enough anymore, like they all did, all the ones who had money at this time. He wanted something new. So he had the design made up, but the new castle hadn't been built yet, like during his lifetime.
Yes.
But he had the designs made. Mm-hmm. But, I said earlier, John only had daughters.
Yes.
No sons.
What are we going to do?
So what happened?
Before that, I wonder if there was one just absolute snake oil salesman of an architect convincing everybody they need a new castle, and then he was drawing up the plans. He was just a suave-ass salesman. Just like, oh, it's a bit dingy, isn't it? Oh, I wouldn't be living here with a man of your rank and esteem.
Well, I wonder if a lot of it was cooling of conflict.
Oh, yeah.
So people had more money.
Because I feel the civil wars kind of slow down from here if they haven't stopped already.
I don't think there's another civil war.
Jacobites aside.
Well, yeah, there's the Jacobite risings. Mm-hmm. But there's not another officially named civil war, I don't think.
No, because the neighbours have kind of stopped fighting each other for the land. I guess everyone's going overseas for land now, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter as much. So yeah, it would be a good time to make your castle pretty.
Well, yeah, you'd have more money, and times were changing, tastes were changing. Mm-hmm. People wanted things that were more elegant. You don't need them for fortification anymore. Now it's about status. Status,
and maybe a bit of insulation to keep them warm,
Maybe, but that's secondary. So, John had no daughters. Because of this, John's brother inherited the dukedom.
Yep.
Archibald Campbell became the third Duke of Argyll.
I was worried there. See? They called him John. It was bad luck.
He succeeded to the dukedom in 1743. So just before the 1745 Jacobite Rising.
Yes.
Which I'm sure is what just went through your head.
It is indeed.
Before he became the third Duke, he had already made somewhat of a name for himself in Scottish politics. But he had actually been born down in Surrey.
Oh, yeah?
He wasn't born in Scotland. This is pretty much when the Campbells of Inveraray started spending more and more time in England.
That does make sense, since there was the 1707
Act of Union.
Act of Union. I was going to say unification.
Well, that's where the power is.
So, yes.
So they're moving. And they're gaining land in England, which is more prestigious, even though this is their ancestral home.
Yep.
It's not as valuable in current society. So the Campbells, although they still own Inveraray, they aren't really living there.
Yep. Oh, so do they do it up still?
Well, let's see. Archibald had been in the army, just like his brother had been. He'd also served as Lord High Treasurer for Queen Anne.
Cool.
He supported the Act of Union. He fought against the Jacobites in the 1715 Rising. So he's had a pretty similar career to his brother.
So he just subbed in, basically.
Well, he did do some things for himself. He was one of the men responsible for the Faculty of Medicine being opened at Edinburgh University.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Which is big.
That is big.
And he was one of the founders of the Royal Bank of Scotland.
Oh, wow.
Which still exists.
Yep.
He was one of the men that started it.
Wow.
He was also Lord Justice General, which was, quote, the head of Scotland's highest criminal court, unquote.
Oh, I can see him having an awful lot of money.
Yes.
If you found a bank, you're going to have some money.
Well, scholar, businessman, politician, judge, army man.
Banker.
There's a lot going on there.
That's quite something.
So there were some things that set him apart from his brother. And I assume that he pursued all of this because there was no guarantee he was going to inherit anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was never going to suffer, but he wasn't going to necessarily become the Duke.
No. He had to struggle through.
I know. Self-made man. During the 1745 Rising, regiments of Campbell men were raised and formed what would later be called the Black Watch.
Oh, cool.
Which we've talked about before. There were other clans in these regiments, but Campbells made up a lot of the numbers. So they're quite closely tied to the Black Watch. I'm not sure that Archibald was on the battlefield himself when Culloden came, but there were lots of Campbell commanders in the Hanoverian camp. So he would have known a lot of them, and a lot of them would have been there on his orders.
Yes.
But I don't know if he actually fought that day.
He seems now too high up to do his own fighting.
Yes.
Even to be anywhere near the fighting. Too high risk.
Which was common.
Yeah.
Because he would have been a target for sure.
Absolutely.
I couldn't see any proof that he was there. But there were lots of Campbells there at Culloden. And we all know how it went for the Jacobites that day.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, the Campbells were on the winning side of that one.
Yep, they did well again. They've continued to pick good sides.
They're doing pretty well. After the Rising, now that the conflict was over and the threat was gone, Archibald took the designs that his brother had made and he started construction of Inveraray Castle as we know it now.
Oh, okay.
So his brother had started the process, but he died.
Yep.
So his brother's Archibald's taken it on.
Which is funny if he's in England spending lots of his time down there, but it's still the status of his home that he gets it done up.
Yes, it had a lot of significance to them as a family, as part of their history. But also, by this point, there was no way that anyone could live in it. It was falling apart, just from neglect and age. Apparently, quote, when the third Duke of Argyll inherited his titles and all its trappings in 1743, he came up from his home in England to survey his inheritance. On doing so, he was appalled at what he found. He deemed the castle to be unfit for purpose and decreed that it should be demolished and rebuilt.
Wow.
So it was a sorry state of affairs.
Yeah.
It needed work.
Well, for how old it was, it makes sense.
How old it was, and people hadn't been living there
And then
all the time.
The last people who did live there were crushed by debt, so...
And got chased out.
What are they going to do for it?
So it needed a lot of work. He was living down in England, but he couldn't really have lived here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame then that although he inherited the title, he also inherited just essentially massive debt and having to take care of this very expensive castle.
Oh, kind of, yeah. It's why it's not always a dream to own a castle.
Yeah.
Because you have to make a lot of money. And that's why a lot of them have at least portions of themselves that are open to the public. Mm-hmm. So a family rarely lives in an entire castle anymore. Because it's just too expensive.
Yeah, there's not much profit in just owning a castle.
Now, the new plans for Inveraray, like we said, this wasn't a castle built for fortification, it was built for status. And the design for Inveraray was very gothic and very regal.
Was it built for fornication instead?
I mean, maybe. What they do in their own time is their business. That is private business.
Behind closed portcullis.
Archibald also had plans for very ambitious gardens surrounding the castle. He was very passionate about plants, and he wanted to bring that to Inveraray Castle, because that wasn't really there yet. However, before the construction started on this gothic, regal, plant-filled oasis, Archibald spotted a real problem with the plans for the new Inveraray Castle. Mm-hmm. Do you know what that might have been?
Was the land crumbling away? Was the sea coming in?
No.
Like if it was too close to the water?
No, a good guess, because it was close to the loch.
Loch Fyne.
Yes.
If I remember.
Well remembered.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you.
Oysters.
Oh, I see. No, but that's a good guess.
Okay. In that case, was it... I was going to say like too close to the McDonald land, but that's, as we just said, that wasn't as much of an issue.
Well, they just beat each other up and deal with it that way, I think.
Yeah. I don't know.
The problem with the plans for the new Inveraray Castle was the town of Inveraray.
Oh, is it in the way?
Well, see, Archibald wasn't keen on investing and building this brand new castle from the ground up and having it surrounded by the plebs.
Naturally.
Inveraray town used to be right in front of Inveraray Castle. So where the old castle was on the shore of Loch Fyne. Mm-hmm. But if you visit nowadays, that's not the case.
Oh, did we mention this in the Inveraray jail episode?
Yes, we did. We did. I wanted to see the light bulb. The reason that Inveraray town is not right in front of Inveraray Castle anymore is because Archibald had the whole town of Inveraray demolished and rebuilt further away from the castle before having the new castle built.
It's crazy that was easier than moving the castle.
He moved the entire town by half a mile.
Half a mile is not enough. Because presumably the town has now expanded.
It's still quite a small place in Inveraray, I think. But he didn't want to move the castle. He just didn't want the view of his new castle ruined by the town.
God.
So he moved the town because he did own it.
Yeah.
Effectively. So, yeah.
Mental.
Imagine having that much money.
I know. That's wild, isn't it?
So yeah, that's why Inveraray is where it is today. And we talked about it when we talked about Inveraray Jail.
That is madness. That is absolute madness.
You can go visit Inveraray Jail if you like. It is open to the public.
You can look for the ghosts. Well, I suppose I was wondering first why the townspeople stood for that, but I suppose they don't have a choice, and they might have even been told we're going to rebuild your houses, but we'll build them a bit nicer. Well,
that was probably part of the lure, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can't really do anything about it. They're probably renting the land from him.
Yeah.
It seems like Archibald might not have had all the money required for something of this scale.
Well, that's fair.
But I read that he used government money to fund at least part of this, which seems really dodgy.
That's not good.
Especially because he owns a bank.
I know.
So something's not right there.
Yeah, I at least thought it would be he signed off himself for a giant loan from the bank or something.
It just seems like the government gave him some money to do this.
Ooh, not good.
Even though it didn't hurt anyone, I guess, but it's not serving any real purpose other than improving his view and giving him space to build all these gardens.
Yeah. Because the government could have gone, no, F off, just build your castle in front of them.
Why are we paying for this?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question.
So yeah, that's what he did.
What a baller move. I want to be mad, but it's so impressive. It's like, oh, that's kind of awesome.
It would be absolutely bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Archibald, while he had been completely uprooting and moving a whole town,
Yes.
he had married a woman called Anne Whitfield in 1712. But the two of them never had a son.
Again.
Again.
Oh, God.
So it meant that when he died, Inveraray Castle and the dukedom passed to his cousin because he had a penis.
Well, as long as somebody with a penis has ended up in charge, we don't have to worry.
Oh, I know. Like, thank God.
Whew.
You know, otherwise I'd panic. I'd start like foaming at the mouth.
I know. Can you imagine if like a woman had been left in charge? Like, oh my God, guys.
Me. Like, not strictly related, but when Archibald died, he had property in England as well that got passed on to people and, you know, all stuff like that. But we're going to focus on Inveraray.
Cool.
More than anything. Since that's what this episode was supposed to be. But you can see why I had trouble sticking to it.
That's why the title is hybrid.
But the reason I bring up that he had property in England, although we're not getting into it, is because scandal.
Scandal?
Archibald left all of his stuff in England to his mistress.
Ooh. That's not going to feel good.
How bad is that?
That is really bad.
The other woman.
The other woman.
The other woman.
Like, we've talked about it in other episodes about how things get messy around inheritance. And it's often like the kids end up fighting, particularly more modern times. I assume it happened in older days as well. It's just more documented.
I think it's always happened.
Yeah, it's not a new phenomenon.
I'd imagine in past times you probably couldn't argue it as much.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as prolonged.
There was less wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
But
you couldn't fight it.
Yeah, and generally it's a bit silly. But leaving it to the mistress, though...
I know.
That's not good.
It made me cringe when I read that.
Yep.
He died in 1761.
One?
But Inveraray Castle wasn't finished yet.
Oh.
It wasn't even nearly finished yet.
We're going on to our third generation, sort of.
Third Duke.
Third Duke who's going to try and finish this castle.
Yeah, Inveraray Castle wouldn't be finished for another 30 years.
30 years?
Mm-hmm. So Archibald moved that whole town and never saw the end result.
Oh. Half the people he moved won't see the end result.
30 years.
30 years.
So Archibald never lived in Inveraray Castle. Or not the one that he envisioned anyway.
Oh, it's so dumb. So dumb.
But I guess there wouldn't really be any other way of doing it. Because it's such a big project.
Yeah.
You just kind of commit that it's the right thing to do and just you'd have to be fine with it, I guess.
That's true. I suppose it's the same with some of the cathedrals that got built.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they'd sometimes take hundreds of years to get completed. You just had to believe in the project.
Or just be happy that you're part of that legacy, I guess.
Yeah.
You're not the one who dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
There's calls for more of that in more modern days with, like, science. Of people to take
I see.
a longer view with, like, space travel. So instead of projects being small, have, like, 100-year project that's ongoing, even though the people who start it and work on it won't see its end.
Well, I guess one of the problems with that is technology changes so fast.
Yeah.
You might set a 100-year project, but it might be obsolete in 20.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Interesting.
But it's interesting, isn't it?
John Campbell, Archibald's cousin, is the 4th Duke of Argyll. He's inherited because there were no sons.
Yes.
And he was the grandson of the 2nd Earl to be executed. So he had the concussion, and he's the one who made the pun about the maiden guillotine.
Yep.
That was his grandfather.
All right.
From what I read, John had a bit of a hard time initially growing up because of his grandfather's actions. And this is because John's father suffered for what John's grandfather had done. Yes. John's father was banished.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And so they didn't have a lot of money. They struggled. So he had a bit of a rough time growing up.
So, just to piece this all together for myself and listeners, this John, who's just inherited, his uncle got their land and power back.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
He's the one who went to William and Mary, sided with them, and then got reinstated as Duke. Duke.
And then it's his cousin who had Inveraray rebuilt,
Yes.
but died before he saw it finished.
Okay.
With me?
I am with you.
John was another army man. Like a lot of the Campbells, there's a pretty long and extensive military history if you look into the Campbells. He was a lieutenant colonel when he was only 19.
Wow.
So he's already doing better than Grimm. He had a bit more experience.
Yep.
He followed the traditional landed gentlemanly route of leaving the army and then getting into politics, because he became an MP in 1713.
Odd.
Because remember, he's a contemporary of his cousin, so it does seem like we're going back, but...
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Because we're almost moving sideways for the moment.
Kind of, yeah, because there's no children to inherit.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, though, this John Campbell was the one who interrogated none other than Flora MacDonald herself after the 1745 rising.
Wow. What a bastard.
He interrogated her about how she had helped Bonnie Prince Charlie escape, and he was the one who got her a confession.
Damn.
It's a pretty major part of Scottish history and lore.
Yeah.
He's the one who got the story.
Oh, he was the bad guy in that story.
Yes.
For the confession, in air quotes.
Well, she was a lady. I think she was treated like mildly okay.
Yeah.
But he probably didn't even appreciate it at the time, but he met one of the most famous historical figures, I think, in Scottish history.
I think so.
I think most people know Flora MacDonald.
Certainly the name, if not the story.
And the Sky Boat song.
Yeah. We won't sing it for you. You'll have to look it up.
You guys don't want that, trust me. Trust me. John died in 1770, so he was the Duke for 9 years.
Yeah, because presumably they kind of kept inheriting at an older and older age.
Well, yeah.
Because of how time went on. But, big question. Does he have any sons?
Yes.
Phew.
John Campbell had a son called John Campbell, who became the 5th Duke of Argyll. Can you rest easy now? One of his younger sons, the one who didn't inherit, was apparently the last British governor of South Carolina.
Well, there you go.
Just a kind of side fact for you.
Yeah.
This is where we are in history.
That's it. That's what's going on.
Yep. Lots of colonising happening at this period.
The last British governor of South Carolina.
Because the British were forced out
Yes.
with the revolution.
Of course.
Maybe the Patriot was about the revolution, not the Civil War. I think I had that wrong last episode. I'm sure someone's going to shout at me, but it's only just occurred to me. We were talking about cannonballs and dying by cannonball. I think the Patriot is about the Revolutionary War, not the Civil War.
Maybe. Oh, we talked about it in the blather, so it's all good.
Ah, okay. Anyway, John, the 5th Duke, was another army man, so he's the one who's inherited. He fought during the 1745 rising, so he was at Culloden. He fought there. He also spent time serving in Ireland, too, and married a woman called Elizabeth Gunning, who was half Irish in 1759.
Very cool. I'm very upset. I just realised I missed an opportunity to make a joke about John II.
Oh, do it now.
John the number 2.
Kieran, poop jokes.
Yeah, I missed my chance. I'm so upset. Because we're on to John the 3rd, or the 4th John now.
The 5th.
5th. Got it. Missed opportunity.
Sad for you.
I know.
That this will really eat at you.
You just try and do your best.
Sometimes it's hard just to push it out. See, there's a smile. I knew that would get you.
Anyway, he married a half-Irish woman.
Yes, called Elizabeth Gunning. Now, she was well known for her beauty. She was extremely beautiful. And she actually worked as an actress at the time when John met her, because her mother made her. So one of the original stage mums.
Wow.
They really needed the money. They were pretty poor. So she forced 2 of her daughters into acting to try and bring in some extra cash.
She wasn't just gunning for fame.
Now, Elizabeth had been married before she married John. And this is kind of a wild story. So I know it's not strictly related to Campbells, but I think you're going to be interested in this tale.
Well, I'm curious if she was a poor actress, how she managed to marry into the Campbells.
Well,
because that's quite a step up.
Yeah, absolutely. Elizabeth, like I said, was known for being very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And she met the Duke of Hamilton in 1752, so before John. And he immediately fell in love with her. Like, love at first sight. They met at a party, and they met at a party on Valentine's Day.
Oh.
And he immediately fell in love with her. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The Duke decided that he wanted to marry Elizabeth then and there at that party.
Oh my God.
No waiting, no nothing. They were going to get married that night.
Well, it went from cute to a bit weird, a bit creepy.
So he proposed to her, and Elizabeth said yes.
She'd be stupid not to.
Because he's a duke.
Yep.
Obviously, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But a big deal.
Yes, absolutely.
And completely irregular on his part, deciding to marry someone he's met at a party.
Without anything to, gain.
And no permission from his family. I know he had the title already, but usually that would be taken into account.
I think so.
So no, he decided he wanted to marry Elizabeth that night.
Gasp.
The first minister that they asked to marry them refused because it wouldn't be legal. They didn't have a marriage license and they didn't have any rings, so he wouldn't do it.
No.
So what did they do, Kieran?
Did they go for a traditional hand fasting type thing? So they got married traditionally, but they're not technically legally married.
It's a good solve, but no. They just went somewhere else.
Oh, that's not as fun.
They left the party and they went to somewhere called the Mayfair Chapel because apparently they didn't need a license to get married there.
Did Elvis perform the ceremony?
And no, I think this was a little before Elvis's time.
Okay.
They didn't need a license. They used a ring from a bed curtain.
Wow.
Because they didn't have official rings to get round that loophole. And then they were husband and wife. They got married that night on Valentine's Day after meeting at that party.
Boom. Wifed. Locked in. Crazy.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild. That is absolutely wild.
That's just how beautiful she was.
Damn.
Right?
Well, I can see all his family being rather pissed off and all her family being over the fucking moon.
Well, her mum's going to be delighted.
Yeah.
Because in her mind, I'm sure it's like, oh, well, that's all paid off. Because I managed to get you into these circles. You were at that party.
Yep.
And now you're a duchess.
Crazy.
So Elizabeth had this whirlwind romance. She had children with Hamilton. But like I said, she married John after.
So does he die?
The Duke of Hamilton died of the cold.
Of the cold?
The common cold.
Oh no. Is it because they covered him in leeches when he got it?
I mean, maybe. Bloodletting was popular. I don't know if it was popular then, but yeah, he died of the cold.
Unreal.
So it was after her marriage to him, she was now a widow, she married John, and they had 5 children together. But she died in 1790, so 16 years before he did. Now, John was actually promoted to Field Marshal in 1796.
Oh.
After she had died. And that's a big deal. That's the highest rank possible in the army. There's nothing above Field Marshal.
Good job.
I mean, fair.
Yeah, that's aight. That's aight.
But as I said, he died after Elizabeth. He died in 1806. When he left the army, he spent his retirement living in the almost newly finished Inveraray Castle.
Yay!
So he was the first of them to get the benefit of it. That he actually got to live there.
And they're just been like, this is nice.
This was worth all the money my ancestors pumped into it.
Yep, and I'm so glad I don't have to look at the common folk while I'm in here. That would have just totally ruined the whole experience.
I hate little fishing towns
Yep.
with cute little white buildings and
Hate
town
it.
squares.
Ugh, gross. Get him out of here.
His son became the 6th Duke of Argyll, and he was called George.
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 She's not John, Archibald, or Colin.
Nope.
What is happening here?
Well, there were King Georges at this time,
Oh, that's true.
and he was called George.
So did... I might have missed it. Did herself,
Elizabeth,
have kids with Hamilton?
she had, yes, but she also had children with John.
And then, so would have gone to John's children. Not, yeah.
But then her other children inherited the dukedom of Hamilton
Oh, of course.
because he was also a duke.
Oh, well, that's a pretty, stellar matchup then, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that explicitly, but she was already a duchess
Yeah, of course.
and she had been widowed. So she couldn't inherit, she wasn't a duchess on her own, so to speak. Her children had that title when her husband died.
Yes, but her children were... Or one of them was a duke.
Yes, and then that made it easier for her to marry John.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because she has... It's horrible, but she has more to offer that way.
Well, politically and financially, yes.
Yeah.
And that's how they made these decisions.
And I'm not saying that's right, it's just the case.
Maybe she got it both ways. She had the whirlwind romance and maybe the more calculated for longevity marriage.
Yeah. Oh, well, so... George.
He's the 6th Duke of Argyll. And there really is not much to say about him.
No, can't even make a toilet joke.
He's pretty dull. He was a member of the House of Lords.
Yeah.
He married the daughter of an earl. It seems that they had a genuinely happy marriage, at least,
Well, that's
from what
nice.
I read. They seemed genuinely in love, but they didn't have any children. And not that that's what you need to be happy, but in their case, there's no one to pass the dukedom down to.
That's tricky. No one also doesn't have a penis.
Well, yeah, they didn't have any. So the title passed to John Campbell, who was George's little brother.
Okay.
He became the 7th Duke of Argyll.
So it's gone quite tricky, really, because you had a pretty clear succession all the way down for the first 10 dukes. And now it's getting really muddled. Or not 10 dukes, sorry, 10 earls. But now we've got to dukedom.
Yeah, if I could lay it out in a diagram, it would be harder to keep track. It'd be going far more sideways.
Yeah, because it's gone straight down, but now it's kind of zigging back and forth sideways.
Because for a lot of episode 1, the Campbells were having anywhere between 5 and 12 children.
Whereas now we're on to Duke number 7, but I think it's only 3rd generation,
Possibly.
I think.
Certainly not 7.
Yeah.
John, George's little brother, was born in London. He went to private school, as you would expect. He met Napoleon,
That's pretty cool.
and he was in the army. Now, he actually commanded something called the Argyll and Bute Militia, and they were kind of a home army. They didn't fight abroad. They stayed in the west of Scotland, kind of like a home guard, but more official.
Yeah.
John was married 3 times because his wife kept dying, and he had 3 kids with his first wife. But John was a dodgy character.
Uh-oh.
Eyebrows, eyebrows.
Eyebrows, eyebrows.
Quote, in 1841, the 7th Duke of Argyll, along with other British and Irish noblemen, established the British-American Colonisation Association,
Ooh.
also known as the British-American Association. This entity was involved in monetising the migration of foreign populations to British North America, which was not without controversy, unquote.
Does that mean slaves? Is that code for slaves?
No, but it's not a good thing.
Doesn't sound like a good thing.
He was literally a coloniser.
Yeah.
He's part of the Colonisation Association.
Oh.
So he organised to help people from Britain move to America and Canada, I think.
I see.
And making money off it. So this was a kind of business deal along with trying to populate North America.
Yep.
But there were already people living in North America. There were
Yeah.
already native people there. They didn't care about them. But part of the fee that they were charging was for the people who were migrating would get provisions upon their arrival to help them start their new life. But a lot of people who paid for this service and this aid didn't get any provisions when they got there and were just abandoned completely and had to try and scratch a living themselves. So they were completely abandoned, and John was part of that.
Yeah, just let off the boat and just good luck. Bastard.
Yep.
On every which way.
Bad, 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 bad.
Every which way
All
is
bad.
terrible.
But yeah, he was literally part of the Colonization Association.
Ugh.
It's not even like slang. I'm not even taking the piss. That was its name.
It's not good.
Very bad. He died 6 years later after inheriting and what have you. And it was his second son who inherited because his first son had already died. So his first son died before he did. So his second son, George Campbell, became the 8th Duke of Argyll.
Don't know how I missed it. What was his name?
George.
George.
Another George. This George was very interested in science.
Ooh.
Which I thought was interesting.
Tell me more.
This is the mid to late 1800s.
Okay.
So a lot of advancements happening during this time. He was involved quite heavily in the discovery of fossils.
Oh, yeah.
He was a big ornithologist, which means he studied birds.
Birds, yeah.
And he was actually, quote, one of the first to give a detailed account of the principles of bird flight in the hopes of advancing artificial aerial navigation.
Interesting.
Unquote.
That's pretty cool.
So he was pretty heavily invested in science and had a, pioneering mind.
Yeah, fair. He would have been buddying around with John Muir as he went over to America and stuff.
Yeah. He was president of lots of scientific societies. He was involved with lots of universities. I'm just not going to list them all.
No.
Although he came out against Darwin's theory of evolution.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't agree with that. He didn't like it.
It was very controversial.
It was. And he didn't like it. But yeah, big science head, which we don't hear all the time.
No, I like that. That's always kind of what I hope for these really rich families, that instead of just going into politics for selfish gain, they kind of give themselves to the arts and sciences and things.
At least you can better things for other people.
Exactly. You can, because you don't need to worry financially overall, unless your castle burns down or some other tragedy. That you can then give yourself to helping others in science or the arts and stuff, making things that others can enjoy.
Yeah, George was kind of a mixed bag because he was super interested in science, but there were other things that he did and other things he was involved with that weren't as nice. So he's not all good or all bad. He was into politics as a titled man. I think it's just kind of a given.
Yep.
But was at least on the side of the North when the American Civil War broke out.
Well, that's good.
So anti-slaves. It's the bare minimum, but it's always nice to hear.
Yep.
And that started in 1861.
Okay.
He was also an advocate for changes to the education system in Scotland. He wanted to improve it. And in 1872, the Education Act was introduced. Do you know what that meant?
Did it mean all kids under the age of, 12 had to go to school?
Yes. All children between the ages of 5 and 13 had to go to primary school.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been mandatory before. You didn't have to. And now you did.
Very good.
So he was part of that. He wasn't the sole person.
Yeah. I could weirdly see a lot of pushback from that in the Highlands and farming communities.
Oh, 100%.
Where you needed kids to work, even at that young an age.
Well, that's why you have October holidays in Scotland.
Yeah, that's true, for the potato harvest.
That's why you're on holiday. It's the tatty picking holiday.
But I think that's a good thing. I can agree with that.
He was also Secretary of State for India for a while. But I read that while he was in this role, he was directly responsible for the Second Afghan War breaking out.
Oh, no.
Now, it's all a bit confusing. We would have to get into lots of politics and lots of history just for that alone. So I'm not going to get into it. But this is what I'm saying. He has all of these interests and all these good things, but he is a product of his time.
Yes. Well, when you first said it, I'm like, well, everyone's good and bad.
Yeah,
People make bad mistakes, and there's what's normal at the time. You can get swept along in it. That's pretty bad, though.
Yes.
That's not good.
From what I remember reading, it was a fair amount of incompetence on his part that led to this happening. So it wasn't just things bubbling over out of his control. he kind of fucked up, I think.
Yep. Also, I'm much more behind having to go to school until you're 13 than I am having to do maths until you're 18.
Oh, stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Let's have a podcast episode about that, please.
Not
If I had to do maths until I was 18, I think I would have left school early.
Yeah.
Because I hated it. I really struggled with it. Nonsense.
I did do maths while I left school at 17 because I'm younger. But I did maths all the way through, but I still don't think everyone should do it.
Oh, no, it should be your choice.
Yeah.
Depending on what you want to do.
Ridiculous.
If it's not going to serve you, why
Ridiculous.
do it?
Yeah.
I've resented getting my higher.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's probably not strictly relevant.
It's
It's something I'm very passionate about. It's stupid.
well, it popped into my head there.
So yes, responsible for the second Afghan war. What you're going to find interesting, though, is that he married a woman called Lady Elizabeth Levison Gower,
Okay.
which is a name that we've heard before.
Is it?
Yes. I know you don't believe me, but it is. Her dad was the second Duke of Sutherland.
Of Dunrobin?
Yes.
Oh.
So we talked about it in the Dunrobin episode. Elizabeth's grandparents were the ones that we talked about at length, who are best remembered for how they cleared people off their land.
Oh. Yep.
So they were her grandparents.
Her grandparents.
So this is where the Campbells and the Sutherlands came together, which we did talk about.
Yes, we did, didn't we? Oh, my grandparents were responsible for the clearances. Oh, my great-granddad was executed.
And his father before him.
Yep, it's fun being a noble.
We had two of the biggest families in Scotland
Well,
brought together, and they had 12 children.
see, they're putting the work in. They're like, we are going
Well,
to
she
have
is.
Well, that's
Jesus
true.
Christ.
His work is minimal.
Oh, well, I mean, his part's fun, at least. When they got married, apparently George was in quite a lot of financial trouble. So marrying into the Sutherland family helped out a lot because they had a lot of money.
Yeah. It's a strange thing that once you get rich enough, you can be in loads of debt and it just doesn't really matter.
Well, you could still live pretty lavishly and be in lots of debt.
Yeah. You're so wealthy, you can have endless debt. Strange.
Well, I feel like it's when you get to the super wealthy.
Yeah.
Although it does seem that they had a genuinely good marriage. Another one.
Always nice.
George always had lots of lovely things to say about Elizabeth.
Oh.
He seemed to genuinely admire her, which is something if you're having 12 children with someone. Elizabeth was really well read. She was smart and she was able to talk about her interests pretty confidently. She could hold her own in conversation, I think with men and women. She was pretty top drawer. She was deeply religious and politically literate, which didn't happen all the time. She was against slavery and campaigned to have it abolished.
Good.
And became good friends with Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was a white American author and a prominent figure in the abolitionist movement.
Name rings a bell.
Yeah, you've probably heard of her before. Obviously, this is kind of skewed because these are white people saying, oh, this is terrible, we simply must do something.
Yes.
But they had views that weren't held by everybody at the time, is what I'm trying to say.
It's still good that they had that view.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, they're white people.
Yes.
And they're noted for their opinion when people of colour didn't get their opinion noted.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Elizabeth died before George did. And it actually happened while she was having dinner in London with William Gladstone, who had been Prime Minister and had been George's boss.
Ooh.
She died at dinner with him.
Oh.
And I cannot think of anything worse.
Nope. Do you think he bored her to death?
Maybe. Can you imagine?
No.
It's like there's that story of this musician in America who died while he was giving a performance at the piano.
Oh, yeah.
In front of a concert of people in a concert hall. He just keeled over.
Mental.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right? She died in 1878 and George died in 1900 at Inveraray Castle.
Wait, she died when?
1878.
Oh, I heard 1788. He died 120 years later.
No. 1878.
Okay, yes. Oh, so are we contemporary? In the scheme of this episode, we're contemporary, now that we're into the 1900s.
I think recent history or like modern times counts as like 50 years, 75 years in the past. It's kind of like copyright, I think. But George had married 2 more times after Elizabeth. The rotter.
Fair enough.
You're not allowed to get married if I die.
I know.
Glad we got that straightened out. In 1877, just before Elizabeth died, there was actually a big fire at Inveraray Castle.
Oh.
Only 100 years after it was finished.
I just alluded to it by accident.
Yeah. Big changes were made when the repairs were done to the castle after this fire, which includes the cone-shaped roofs, which you can see today.
Oh, yes. I looked at a photo in the first episode.
Yeah, so Inveraray Castle is a big square, and there's these cone towers in each corner.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure these were built after this fire.
Like an upside-down ice cream cone.
Yes. She couldn't inherit because she didn't have a penis. But George and Elizabeth's daughter, their 10th child, Frances, actually decided to do something about that.
What? Ooh, intrigue settling in.
So I know she's the 10th child, but I want to tell you about her.
Please do.
She was, quote, the only member of the aristocracy and the only Scot to have a leadership role in the British women's suffrage campaign, unquote.
Okay, that's
Suffrage is the right to vote. And Frances was a prominent suffragist.
Yes.
Now, a suffragist is different to a suffragette.
Oh.
Do you know the difference?
I do not.
I learnt about this in standard grade history. Suffragists felt that the best way to get women the vote was to use peaceful methods. So, going through Parliament, due process, writing letters, being reasonable and persuasive and polite.
I was genuinely about to say, did suffragettes throw themselves under carriages?
Suffragettes were more militant. So things like throwing yourself under the king's horse, doing big things to generate publicity, and generally making life inconvenient and uncomfortable because this has to be sorted.
Yep.
And otherwise they wouldn't be listened to. So there's these 2 different groups approaching the same problem in very different ways, which is why they split, ultimately. And obviously this is predominantly white women in these movements advocating for white women getting the vote.
Yeah.
I'm aware it's all a bit murky. But Frances was a suffragist. And like I said, the only member of the aristocracy and the only Scot to have a leadership role.
Very cool.
In
All right, Francis.
Right?
Yeah.
In 1918, women who were over 30 were allowed to vote. And the change that happened in 1918 also further widened the vote for men. And it wasn't until 1928 that all women over the age of 21 were allowed to vote in the UK.
Crazy.
Almost 100 years ago. Not even 100 years ago.
Did the first time when it was over 30... was that okay, you can vote when you're over 30, but we'll make it so men can vote when they're over 21?
Literally, yes.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
And previous to these, I think there were conditions like you have to own land.
Yeah.
It changed several times over the years. But yeah, it was 1928.
Mental.
Ridiculous. But yeah, Frances was part of that campaign, and she actually saw it done because she died in 1931.
Well...
Isn't that cool?
That is really cool.
You don't hear about that all the time.
Nope. I like that. I thought she was going to do something about not inheriting as a woman, but it's still very cool though.
Trying to create a level playing field.
Yeah.
So that things like that don't matter.
Good work.
No, there still hasn't been anything done about the right to inherit.
Oh, because we talked about that possibly in the Dunrobin episode.
We did, yeah. It's still legal to not pass down to your daughter. I think for some of them they can only pass down to sons. And it was only in the past few years that they changed it for the royal family.
Oh, yeah.
It was when Prince William and Kate were having their first child. The law changed before Prince George was born, that regardless of whether he was a boy or a girl, he would be in the line of succession. Whereas before, had he been born a girl, it would have skipped him.
Yep.
And that was very recent. So no, unfortunately, that isn't different yet.
Well, that's okay, because...
Maybe I should have led into that differently.
Quite all right.
Like I said, though, Frances did not inherit the dukedom from her father, even though it would have been pretty cool if she had.
Would have been pretty cool. Well, I mean, she was the 10th child. It was a long shot, regardless.
Very true. But she might have been the coolest.
Well, he definitely would have been the coolest.
And I think they may have avoided much of their later drama had she inherited.
Ooh. What? So who... You and your hooks. Who inherited then?
Well, her eldest brother did, silly. John Campbell. The 9th Duke of Argyll.
The 9th Duke of Argyll?
Yes.
So is this the 19th overall? Did we have 10 earls and then 9 dukes?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so.
Just a lot.
A lot of them. It's been a long, long line. Because we had all the earls before, but I can't remember the total. Like so many before him, John was involved in politics. But what was really surprising about John was just how much he elevated the Campbells into real high society.
They're not already in real high society?
They're about to become even more so.
Oh, God. I'm just going to get more and more disgusted if we're going to get into even higher society.
John married one of Queen Victoria's daughters.
Oh, well. Well, that's good going. Like, if you're going to make a statement, that's a statement.
You surprised?
I am surprised. I almost think no one's allowed to marry into the royal family.
Well, he did.
They're only allowed to marry each other.
Gross. He married Princess Louise.
Well. And
they got married in 1871. Partly because Queen Victoria refused to let Louise marry a foreign prince. She didn't want Louise to move away from home. Enough. So when Louise fell in love with John, although he wasn't royalty, he was high class, the Queen gave them her permission because it meant that she would stay at home.
Yeah. Well, there aren't other princes in the UK, so have to settle for a duke.
Queen Victoria was very attached to her children. She had lost her husband, Prince Albert, very early, and she struggled a lot with letting her children leave her care in her home. She wasn't ever really happy at them starting lives without her, so this was difficult for her. And Louise was Victoria's personal secretary up until she got married. And this was a role that got passed down to the next youngest child who was still at home.
Oh, cool.
So it happened with her siblings, and Louise was Victoria's 6th child. So the responsibility had passed down as they moved out and moved on. Very
cool. So does he become a prince? Since he married a princess?
Kind of. Not quite. It's tricky with titles. I think at most he would be prince consort.
Yeah.
Because he married in. Her brothers would be princes.
Just be a prick.
Yeah. I read that Victoria was super keen to find Louise a husband because Louise had a reputation for being an outspoken liberal and feminist. And rumours were going round that she was having lots of affairs with different men.
Nice.
So Victoria had to get her married quick to kind of stop these rumours from going round.
Stop it.
Louise and John got engaged at Balmoral Castle.
Oh.
And were married at St George's Chapel, which is at Windsor Castle.
Oh.
All these places are closely linked with the royals today. So it's strange to think about all this happening with the royals 100 years ago.
I know. It certainly doesn't seem all that far away.
No. Well, St George's Chapel is where Harry and Meghan got married and various other royals have gotten married in the recent past. That's where they were married to.
Well, there you go. Balmoral is just where they make the chicken.
I mean, it's got a different reputation now. It's where Queenie died.
Oh, yeah.
You're looking at me so blank.
Yeah, I was going to say, does it?
Where she bit the dust. Victoria struggled when Louise left to start married life. And she apparently even got in touch with the couple while they were still on their honeymoon. She couldn't last 4 days after the wedding before getting in touch with Louise.
Miss you.
And she gave them a maple wood desk as a wedding present, which is still at Inveraray Castle.
Oh, that's quite cool. Imagine having the Queen as your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And especially your mother-in-law who's obsessed with her daughter.
Well, and Queen Victoria, she was a landmark.
Yep.
She's your mother-in-law.
Bit of a land ship, I think.
Unfortunately for Queen Victoria, John was made Governor-General of Canada from 1878 to 1883. So the couple actually moved to Canada during this time.
No. Poor Queenie.
I think it probably wouldn't have been so bad because it was temporary. Like, he wasn't from Canada. But I can't imagine she took it very well.
No.
They had a bit of a bumpy start over there. People in Canada had heard that members of the royal family were coming to fill the post of governor and kind of expected them to be a nightmare because they were royals and you have this idea in your head.
I don't blame them at all.
Right.
I would be exactly the same. Like, well, what do you know about being the governor of Canada?
Yeah.
If you'd probably never been to Canada.
They envisioned them being very hoity-toity and everything being expensive and the two of them being quite uncaring. But it seems like John and Louise genuinely put a lot of effort into learning about Canada and its people and its culture and its native culture.
Even I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I was too. They held lots of events and parties during their time there, and lots of people were invited. And John and Louise didn't come across as stuffy while they were there. And one of the things people either loved or hated them for was that they weren't as discriminatory with their guest lists.
Oh.
Basically, as long as you could afford the clothes that you needed to wear to this kind of party, you could come. It didn't matter what you did.
That's, in the scheme of things, that's pretty good. Like, my instinct is to be like, well, that's still a bit like, because these clothes would have been expensive.
I know.
But in the scheme of things, that's pretty good.
It annoyed the upper class people who went to these events because they felt like the people who were beneath them shouldn't be allowed to come to the same event.
Yeah.
And one of the things was they shouldn't be encouraging them to think that they're equal. So, I mean, I'm happy if it pisses the upper class off.
Me too. I can get behind that.
But yeah, people either loved it or hated it about them that they did that. Louise was recorded as catching a 28-pound salmon during her time in Canada.
That's a big salmon.
That's 13 kilos.
That's a big salmon. Woofed.
So she was getting involved.
Yeah.
And she was also in a really bad sleigh accident.
Oh no.
Which was downplayed so that Queen Victoria wouldn't blow her fucking top when she heard.
Oh.
It was played off as just like a mild bump, but the whole thing crashed and overturned, and she was knocked unconscious and stuck underneath the sleigh.
Uh-oh.
And they had to try and free her. She was out cold. It was really bad.
A new definition to slay, Queen.
My God.
Also, I have in my head that when the sleigh overturned, it would burst into flames just inexplicably to the drama when they were retelling it.
There's nothing to catch fire.
Then the engine exploded.
Except a lantern, maybe.
I'm sorry?
It's snowy and you're in a sleigh. It's cold. I can't say for sure how happy their marriage actually was, John and Louise. I read a lot that suggested they weren't entirely happy, but I also read a lot that suggested they cared deeply about each other.
Well, I mean, that's fair.
It's hard to say. They spent a lot of time apart. Louise actually came back to England in 1881 without John. She left Canada early. He didn't come back until 1883 when his post ended, like I said. And the pair lived in Kensington Palace in London. Queen Victoria gave them a home in Kensington Palace. There's different apartments in Kensington.
Okay.
So she gave them one of them.
Crazy.
And apparently this was for the best because the Duke's affairs weren't entirely in order and they didn't have a lot of money.
Oh no.
I read that the couple actually avoided inviting any of Louise's family up to Inveraray because it was just a state.
That's a shame. It's a shame that it's been left to ruin again after spending 30 years building it. You want at least 300 years good use to get a return on investment.
I will say that apparently Inveraray Castle became the first place in Scotland to have electricity installed.
Oh yeah?
So they were doing stuff.
Yeah.
It just wasn't up to a royal standard.
Well, that's different, isn't it? I suppose. It's one thing being happy to live there and another thing inviting the Queen around.
Yeah, so I think it was probably a bit run down.
And inviting Queen Victoria around.
Yes, Queen of the Empire, or Empress of the Empire.
Yeah.
She was Empress. Louise was actually the first patron of the Princess Louise Scottish Hospital for Limbless Sailors and Soldiers, which changed over time to become Erskine.
Oh.
Which nowadays is a charity that supports veterans in Scotland.
Yeah.
So it still exists.
Oh, that's cool.
She was the first patron.
That's
and
nice.
They named the hospital after her, obviously.
Fair.
Lots of rumours swirled and surrounded the pair throughout their lives. There were rumours that Louise had had an affair with an old tutor of her brother's, and that she had been in love with him long before she met John, and she had the secret child with this tutor, and he was basically disappeared. There were rumours that John was gay because he had lots of male friends, and his male friends were accused of being gay, so they thought because he was their friend, he was also gay.
Yep.
Which, in this case, is being used as an insult.
Yes.
It's not wrong to have friends, but it's also not wrong to be gay. Like,
Stupid on many levels.
Very. But there were also rumours that John was involved in the theft of the Irish crown jewels.
Well, that's an accusation. Tell me more. I don't care if he's gay or not. That does move me up or down. Theft of the Irish crown jewels. I didn't even know there were Irish crown jewels.
Well, it's kind of a story for another day. We can't get too into it. But the Irish crown jewels were swiped in 1907.
Okay.
They were worth about 30 grand back in 1907, which is worth about £3.5 million now.
Oofed.
And they've never been found.
Never been found.
No one was ever held responsible, and no one ever found them again.
Oh my God.
They disappeared. And there were several different people that they thought were involved. And I think with John, it was kind of through association that he was suspected. Because there was a few people they thought might be involved, and he was kind of in that group. He knew them, he was friends with them. But I think a lot of it was squashed at the time so that it wouldn't come back on Louise or the Queen.
Well, that would be good.
So it was stamped down. But he was suspected of having a hand in it.
That's wild. Do you think they were stripped down and sold for parts?
I mean, it would be easier to sell them.
I imagine very diamond encrusted, covered in jewels.
Very valuable.
Yeah, so.
But
wild.
yeah, proper heist, and they've never been found.
Yeah, or they're just in the Kremlin.
I mean, maybe. When John died of pneumonia in 1914, Louise was apparently heartbroken. So, like, maybe their relationship was misunderstood. You don't know it unless you're in it yourself.
Could have been complicated.
Yeah. But she took it really, really badly. And she missed him terribly. She lived until 1939.
Wow.
She died when she was 91.
Oh.
And she continued to make public appearances after her husband's death. She supported her brother when he became King Edward VII.
Oh, well.
She supported her nephew, who was King George V.
Yep.
Her great-nephew, King Edward VIII. And he abdicated. And then finally she supported and met her great-nephew, King George VI.
Yep.
And she even met Queen Elizabeth when she was still a child.
Wow. That's wild. Do you think it was the outbreak of the Second World War and she was just like, I can't handle that?
Maybe just, I'm not here for this.
No, sorry guys, I'm just going to let myself pass on.
But seeing all of those monarchs, she was there for all of them.
Oh. And I bet she was well respected.
She was, but she was also like kind of a firecracker. The things I read about her, she kind of said what she wanted, and
ooh,
she was an interesting creator.
A mad ant, but
Kinda,
like to
yeah.
the royals.
Yeah.
Love it. Love everything about it.
Especially after John's death, that she really just did what she wanted. John was buried at Kilmoon Parish Church. I said before, a lot of the Campbells were buried there. But she was buried at Frogmore. Yeah, Frogmore. That's where Victoria and Albert are buried. She's buried with them. And her funeral was very small because World War II had broken out. So there wasn't much fanfare for her at the time.
Fair.
And apparently, she died with a 15 shilling debt that she'd incurred while buying cigarettes.
That's just such a like a rebel thing to do. She's the new rebel.
I thought that was funny.
I like that.
I thought it was interesting.
Well, her son, presumably, has become Duke Campbell, the Duke of Argyll, the 8th.
John and Louise didn't have any children.
Uh-oh. Well, I beg your pardon.
They didn't have any kids. So the dukedom passed to their nephew, Niall Campbell, who became the 10th Duke of Argyll.
So it went... Yeah, so like his nephew.
Yeah, John's nephew.
By blood.
Because it was his title.
Yeah.
Although Louise was
Of course.
princess, it was his title, so it went to his family.
Yep.
To Niall. From what I can tell, he did serve during the First World War. He had been a deputy lieutenant from 1914, and he had other various military titles and honours when his uncle died and he became duke.
Mm-hmm.
He had the bell tower built in Inveraray, which is still there. And he built it as a memorial to the Campbells, who died during World War One. So very similar to what we talked about at Eilidh, that there's a war memorial there too for the McRaes.
Well,
this is
nice.
the Campbell one.
Mm-hmm. The Campbell bell tower.
Yes. Niall was an odd one. He was an odd creator. He spent a lot of his life in fear that he would develop the same mental illnesses, the same eccentricities, quote unquote, that his mother had when he'd been growing up, which is a shame. Janie Campbell, or I'm Janie, maybe you meant Jane. She had been orphaned as a child and then placed under the care of the 8th Duke.
Okay.
Which is how she married his second son.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how Niall inherited. The 8th Duke was the one who wrote about the birds and stuff. So
Birdman.
she was his ward, and then she married one of his sons.
Mm-hmm.
Because Niall was so worried about having the same issues that his mum had, he never married and he never had any children.
Oh.
He decided that wasn't for him. He didn't want it.
Wow. I wonder what he was referring to then. I wonder what her eccentricities were.
It could have been any number of things, really.
Yeah. But to make him that afraid.
Well, there's that, but there is also the possibility that he may have been mentally ill.
Oh, yes.
He was known in the area around Inveraray, that's where he lived. Mm-hmm. He was known for being eccentric and a bit strange. Not bad with it, just a bit odd.
Yeah.
So it could be a mixture of things. He really didn't like modern technology. He refused to have a car.
Yep.
Didn't want one. He would, quote, greet tourists with recitals from Italian operas, unquote.
It's a bit odd, isn't it?
Nothing harmful in it.
No.
I'm not saying he's a bad person or anything.
Not at all.
That doesn't make you a bad person. He was a bit different.
Yeah.
And he kept to himself a lot, which would make sense if he was kind of fearful or distrustful.
Yep, I'm with you.
He died in 1949, and his first cousin, once removed, inherited the title.
Now, what does that mean?
I think... Oh, I was just going to lie there. So, first cousin is the child of your great uncle or great aunt.
Okay.
So your grandparents' niece or nephew is your first cousin.
Yes.
Once removed.
Yep. So it's your parents' cousin.
Yes.
Is your first cousin? Yep.
Yes. First cousin once removed.
Oh, but that's once removed. Okay.
Yes. Or apparently your first cousin could also be your cousin's child. Is first cousin once removed.
Interesting. Oh, I see. So it's one generation up or down from your cousin, kind of. No,
Yes.
not really.
That's my answer. I'm sticking with it.
We'll go with that.
It was his first cousin once removed who inherited after Niall, and he was called Ian Campbell, the 11th Duke of Argyll. Now, his story is scandal.
I was about to say, is this where we start getting scandalous?
Scandal. A very British scandal.
A very British scandal. Wait a second. He didn't have tea after 4 p.m, did he?
Oh, it's worse than that.
Oh, no.
I mean, it shouldn't really be, but it is. Would you like to hear about him?
Yes, I would.
Ian is one of the more famous Dukes of Argyll, but not for the best reasons, and certainly not reasons he would ever have wanted.
No. Oh, God.
Aside from what made him and his wife notorious later, Ian served in World War II as a captain, and he was actually held as a prisoner of war in France.
Oh, wow.
During World War II. He was there when the Nazis took France and was taken prisoner at Normandy.
Jeez, oh.
So he became Duke just after being at war, really. He wasn't released until 1945. So he had a pretty traumatic war experience all in. He was an officer, so he may have had a slightly easier time than like a private, but being a prisoner of war under Nazi rule, that's not going to be fun.
No, that's not a good time.
So he served, he did that. Ian married 4 times in total, but had a terrible reputation.
Oh no, murdering his wives.
He was into all the bad stuff. Drinking, gambling, substance abuse, domestic abuse. You name it, Ian was accused of it.
Oh no.
Unfortunately, it's almost kind of typical of someone who served in war.
Yeah.
And that's not an excuse. You shouldn't treat people that way. I'm not saying that because it's never right. It's just unfortunately quite typical, I think.
Well, you can see where it came from.
Especially like World War II, Second World War, they're coming home and they're not getting the care or the therapy that they need.
Yeah.
To turn it inwards on themselves and then they lash out at other people. So not good.
Not good.
It was Ian's 3rd marriage that made the newspapers in a big way.
Okay.
There's a chance if you're listening to this, I know Kieran hasn't. There's a chance if you're listening to this, you might already know what I'm talking about.
Oh.
Especially if you watched the show A Very British Scandal that had Claire Foy and Paul Bettany in it. That was made very recently, and that's about this whole saga.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yes.
No idea.
I know, and that's fine. Ian's first 2 marriages hadn't gone well. He had several children by this point, but hope was kindled for a fresh start when he met and married Margaret Wigham in 1951.
Okay.
Margaret was a society darling and had already lived a pretty wild life before she married Ian when she was 39. She had gotten pregnant by David Niven, who was an actor. You won't know him. When she was 15. And when... Oh no, I've just written that wrong. She got pregnant by David Niven, who was an actor, when she was 15 and he was 18. And had a secret abortion, which was like the worst of the worst.
Yep.
You can have your own feelings on that, but I honestly don't think it's that big a problem.
No.
She was engaged to the 7th Earl of Warwick, but broke it off because she fell in love with someone else.
Oh my God.
She had an affair with Prince George, the Duke of Kent, while he was married.
Ew.
And he was the Prince George who died in the airplane crash in Caithness.
Oh.
And whose body was taken to Dunrobin Castle in secret in 1942.
Wow.
This is the same person. We talked about that in our Dunrobin episode. But nobody knew that he had been taken there at this time.
Yes.
In 1943, Margaret even fell down a lift shaft.
Oh no.
So comically terrible that it doesn't seem real, but that happened to her.
A wild child.
Yes, very much so.
Not that falling down a lift shaft makes you a wild child, but
no,
in general...
everything else in context, yes. But yeah, she fell down a lift shaft.
That's not good.
That's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah. Just goes to show being in high society can protect you from gravity.
Yeah, you have to watch where you're walking.
Yep. Be careful in lifts. That's the takeaway here.
We're so good at this.
That's the takeaway from these 3-parters.
Be careful. Lifts exist. Or elevators, if you're of the American persuasion.
They will lift you up and they will throw you down.
So, in 1951, Margaret became the Duchess of Argyll. But her marriage to Ian was absolutely not happy. In any way.
Well, yes, I saw that coming.
Are you surprised?
No.
Do you want to know what happened next?
Yes.
He stole money from her to repair and keep up Inveraray Castle.
That was a lot of money.
That's how he was funding that. And even though from the outside she literally had it all, she had fame, wealth, prestigious husband, admiration. Remember, this is the 50s, so you have a prestigious husband, you're not allowed to be sad. She wasn't happy.
Yeah.
She absolutely wasn't happy. She wasn't blameless in the relationship. I read that she tried to start rumours that her husband's children with his previous wives weren't actually his, so they shouldn't inherit.
That's going to get messy.
Yeah, shouldn't be doing that.
Nope, that's not good.
One of the wilder things I read was that she even tried to acquire a newborn baby she could pass off as her husband's rightful heir.
Well, you can't go buying babies.
Because the two of them never had children together, but they had children independently.
Yes.
Margaret had children of her own.
Who presumably she wanted to become the heirs.
Well, yes. Because if his previous children aren't legitimate, she could be like, well, what about my children? We're married.
We're married, though. What about my children, though?
Margaret had 3 children of her own, I believe. But they were older. There would be absolutely no way she could try to say they were Ian's.
Yes.
So she had to do it in a roundabout kind of way.
She seems mad enough to try.
It's just not good.
To be like, no, we met in secret 18 years ago and had my son. That's what actually happened.
And then again with my other child.
Yeah.
And then again with my other child. No. After several years of marriage, this horrendous marriage,
Yeah.
Ian became suspicious that his wife was having affairs behind his back.
Probably.
Can't say I blame him for being suspicious, and I can't say I blame her if things were really that miserable.
Well, exactly. It's just
They're not being good to each other.
obviously all round.
You know. When she was away in New York, Ian paid someone to break into one of her cabinets while she was gone.
Ugh.
Total invasion of privacy.
Yep. Icky.
What he found became absolutely infamous. Because remember, this is like the 50s and 60s.
Do you find like a gimp suit or something?
He found, or I say he, the guy he paid.
Yeah.
He found some Polaroid photos.
Oh.
Very incriminating photos of Margaret.
Uh-oh.
She was naked in all of them.
Uh-huh.
She was in the company of a man in some of them. This man has never been officially identified.
Okay.
Because you can't see his face. And in some of them, she was entertaining this man.
Well, I mean, who cares? To me.
Absolutely. Who cares? Now. Like, fine, do whatever. He's invaded your privacy. There's a private photos. Do what you want, as long as you're not hurting anybody. In the society of that time, in that kind of high society environment, this was like a bomb had gone off.
Well, then he must have leaked the photos. Well, I say leaked.
Well, I'll get to it.
Okay.
I'll let you know why we know these photos exist. Some people thought that the man in these photos, because they've never officially known who it is.
No one's gone, I recognise that dick.
No, no one. Some people thought that the man was Winston Churchill's son-in-law.
Okay.
A man called Duncan Sandys, who was at that time the Minister of Defence in the UK Parliament.
I mean, he can have fun with a lady. That's
yes,
fine.
I'm not saying this is my view. I'm just saying that's why people cared generally.
That's why there was gasping and the clutching of pearls and such.
They're just photos and it's just sex. It's like, as long as you're not hurting anybody, who cares? I am merely reflecting the views of the time.
Yes.
I'm not saying they're mine.
Well, I am questioning the views of the time, not you.
That's okay. As long as that's clear.
Yes.
It's fine to question. It's fine to question it. I just, please don't think that I'm something I'm not, you know? It wasn't confirmed that it was actually Duncan Sandys, but he did offer to resign, which might make someone look guilty. So it was never confirmed that it was him, and he never outright confirmed it, but he did offer to resign his post.
Seems quite likely.
Maybe.
It's just in solidarity to men everywhere who take pictures of themselves
In solidarity with all the other men who wish it was them.
Yeah. Nice.
Ian decided to divorce Margaret after discovering these photos. That was the final straw, apparently. Even though he was up to all his antics, this was just too far. these private photos that she had locked away in a cabinet that he wasn't supposed to see. And the case was brought to court in 1963.
The divorce case?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, he's bringing the case that his wife has cheated on him.
Yep.
And in court, his lawyers presented a list of all the people his wife had cheated on him with.
Uh-huh.
And there were 88 names on this list.
That's a lot of names. Wow. That's something.
And because it's the 60s, I think there were certain conditions you had to meet to have a divorce granted.
Yeah.
So you had to prove that you had been cheated on.
Yes.
Or like other conditions for other scenarios to actually get divorce. It's only recently that no reason divorce is a thing. Mm-hmm. Or no cause divorce. Margaret countered Ian's claim and said that Ian had been cheating on her with her stepmother.
Ew.
But the case was dropped because they didn't have the witnesses to back it up.
Oh.
And at this time, I'm pretty sure you needed witnesses to back up that your spouse had cheated on you.
Yeah.
In court. Otherwise, they would just throw it out.
Well, if you have to prove that they've done it, or if you have to have reason, you have to prove that they have reason.
Well, you could have proof, but you had to have witnesses, I think.
Oh, okay.
Even if you had proof.
Yep.
It's all a bit twisted. It's all very sexist.
Yeah.
It's a bad time. No one comes out of this looking good.
So if he's married 4 times, he must get his divorce.
Well, Ian got his divorce. It came down on his side.
He got his.
Oh, well, no, he didn't.
Oh.
Mystery Man got his and
That's
seemed
true.
to have a very good time. Margaret had a very good time.
Yeah, someone else got his.
Yes, and I think that's why he was pissed. Ian got the divorce. It ruled in his favour. But Margaret also had to pay her stepmother 25 grand because she sued her for libel and slander for saying that Ian had cheated on her with her stepmom.
Fair enough. Because you should be there just going, what the fuck?
Yeah, she
Excuse
sued
me.
her. When the divorce was handed down, the judge focused mainly on just how disgusting and debased Margaret was, which seems ridiculous. Mm-hmm. He said, Margaret was a completely promiscuous woman whose sexual appetite could only be satisfied with a number of men. I see nothing wrong with that. Her attitude to the sanctity of marriage was what moderns would call enlightened, but which in plain language was wholly immoral.
Enlightened? Is that as in hippies?
Well, that's in quotes in his speech.
Strange.
So, I get if you've entered into a marriage and you've both agreed to be faithful to each other, then what they've both been doing is wrong.
Yeah.
I have, nothing against that at all. If you've agreed to that, then you shouldn't be cheating on your partner. It's one of the worst things you can do. But to frame it that she is at her core a terrible and disgusting person because she likes sex is bizarre.
Very bizarre. She might be a sex addict.
Well, that might be a different issue. Because again, I'm not saying it's good to cheat on your partner.
No.
You can't, if you've agreed into a marriage with terms, then it's not fair to go back on what you've promised.
Absolutely.
But it's just the way that it's framed, how it all came down on her and how she was this terrible person when Ian had been treating her terribly. It was very sexist and very one-sided.
Very much so.
After all of this, Margaret's fortune was never really the same. It hit her hard. She released a memoir in 1975 and started charging people to tour her home.
Wow.
She lived in the Grosvenor House Hotel from 1978, but was evicted in 1990 because she couldn't pay the bills anymore. Her ex-husband, not Ian, and some of her friends paid for her to get an apartment, because she couldn't buy one herself, just so she had somewhere to go.
That's nice.
Basically. Yeah. And she died in 1993 after a fall in the nursing home she was living in by that point. She still had children, so I'm assuming they were providing that for her in her later years. But yeah, she was completely torn apart, and then that was it.
Wild.
She never got to move on.
So that's the very British scandal.
Yes. I think I remember looking at interviews she gave where she was kind of reasonably unapologetic.
Quite right.
I think it was what it was, and she spoke about it after the fact, but her society never really accepted her in the same way again because of this.
Well, there's one thing if you're like a bit of a wild card, and then to them, that would just be a step too far, wouldn't it?
Yes, to them, in their perception. When he and Margaret divorced, Ian married for a final time. So he married a fourth time.
Yep.
And he died in 1973.
Oh.
He died in Edinburgh, but he was actually buried on an island in Loch Awe.
Oh.
Not Kilmoon, like the others had been.
Well, there you go.
Kilmoon. And then Ian's son, Ian, became the 12th Duke of Argyll.
12th Duke of Argyll.
Yes.
Kilmun down and bury your dead.
Morbid. So yes, that was the big scandal.
Ooh. Honestly, I was hoping for something more scandalous.
Yeah, the hype around it at the time was massive.
Yeah.
I cannot state to you how much of a big deal it was.
I can imagine that. I can imagine it being such a problem. And like to British what's the word? Prudishness.
It was a big problem.
It was just, yeah, that would be abhorrent to the public, wouldn't it? But it's a bit daft though, isn't it?
Well, we can look at it in the modern day and see how silly it was. One of the worst things that came out of it was, I think some of the men named on the list that came out in court, not in the photos. I think it was just names. But some of the men named were accused of being gay, and it was illegal to be gay.
Oh.
So Margaret kind of had to not say the wrong thing and not say too much that would incriminate them of being gay.
Yep.
And therefore her, somehow, she would be liable for having sex with a gay man. It was a whole thing. I know.
That's just broke my brain.
I know.
Yeah, we'll breeze past that. That's dumb.
So Ian is the 12th Duke of Argyll.
Yes.
Before we move on to him, though, I want to tell you a bit about the previous Ian's, about one of his daughters-in-law.
Okay.
Who is still living and is an absolute head case.
Oh, yeah?
She's currently in the news in the papers all the time because she talks non-stop about the royal family.
Oh.
She only married into the Campbell family for about 9 months.
Only 9 months?
Before she and her husband, who was another one of Ian's sons, got divorced.
Whoa.
They got married after knowing each other for 5 days.
Well, the fact they stayed married for 9 months is pretty good.
And I'm wondering if those 5 days are how long it took for him to tell her he was a duke.
You have to wonder.
And then she was just like, boom, marry me.
Yeah. Maybe they're trying to repeat history of the other woman who married the Duke on Valentine's Day.
Maybe. Yeah, so she was only part of the Campbell family for 9 months. And she's written books about Princess Diana, Queen Elizabeth, Meghan Markle, the lot. In the one about Meghan and Harry, she compared them to Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi.
Oh.
She talks about how they spin stories and create propaganda, and she has the gall to compare them to one of the highest ranking Nazis.
That's beyond not okay.
She's been on loads of reality shows like I'm a Celebrity, Salvage Hunters.
Oh, yeah.
Celebs Go Dating, all the things you'd expect. And she adopted 2 sons who refer to themselves as counts because she was briefly married to the son of a duke.
No, come on, guys.
Yeah.
We said last episode, you can't give yourself a title. This is why.
Right?
No.
That's why only other people can call Kieran the Battle Harpy.
Exactly.
That's what we agreed.
Yeah, that was the conclusion we came to on Patreon.
Yeah, they refer to themselves as counts.
Oh, that's icky.
She's lied in interviews that she comes from Russian royalty, but that's not true. She was born in Jamaica, and her father, she's white. She was born in Jamaica. Her father owned a department store, and I think her parents had moved to Jamaica from Lebanon. So that maybe, like, I just, it doesn't make sense.
She sounds a bit mad.
Well, she had a genuinely hard time with the press and the media for a while, because there was claims that she had had a sex change when she hadn't, and they started misgendering her in the media.
That's weird.
Which was wrong. It was just this rumour, and like all this stuff about her that wasn't true, and that's never okay.
No, how bizarre.
So that was a genuinely horrible thing. But what I really hate about her, and the reason I don't want to refer to her, is that she went on Good Morning Britain not too long ago, which is an absolute trash red flag for a start.
Yeah, that's Piers Morgan's show, isn't it?
Maybe, I don't even know if he's still there, but absolute trash. She had the nerve to go on Good Morning Britain and used her time on this national platform to make excuses to defend Prince Andrew over his links to Jeffrey Epstein and the awful things that went on between all of them.
What?
Yeah. She went on national television and actually made the argument that there's a difference between a minor and a child.
Oh, God.
So that they did nothing wrong. A minor and a child is different, so...
Oh, he's not that much of a paedophile.
Which is disgusting.
He could have been more of a paedophile, though.
Actually disgusting. She's never walked it back, despite, you know, your reaction being an example of how most people reacted.
Yep.
She's defended her position multiple times, so she's not taking on the feedback, which is why I think it's okay for me to say that that makes her an awful person.
Yep, I think I do know this person, actually. I didn't before, but that rings a bell.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that I'm totally valid in saying you're an awful human being, if you think that that's fine. Especially having been given contrary opinions that you haven't taken on board. Because I think if you find yourself in a camp that includes child rapists, you should probably consider your position and maybe make some changes.
If your only argument is, well, you know, they were 13, they could have been 7.
Ridiculous.
That's not good. That's not good.
Yeah.
That actually makes me feel a bit sick.
Right? Awful. Awful human being.
God.
So I kind of wanted to out this person, but also didn't want to give her the satisfaction of having any kind of recognition or clout.
Fair. I'm behind that. Grim.
Right?
Well, let's move on from her. We'll
Yes,
just
please.
Sweep her behind us.
Ian, the 12th Duke, so Ian's son Ian, was thankfully much more low-key.
Well, that's good.
He was in the army, he worked in finance, he worked in trade, got married, had children, lived at Inveraray Castle. And this is the general story as we get closer to the present day. The details become more scarce, so a lot of the current day Campbells, this is their story.
Yes.
He died in 2001.
Oh, okay.
And Torquil Campbell became the 13th Duke of Argyll.
Torquil?
Torquil.
That's a turn up.
It's not a name I'd heard of before.
No.
He's the Duke currently.
Oh.
And he's living at Inveraray Castle. He's done a lot to revamp it and invites people to come and visit. It's open to the public. Just the certain months of the year. It only just reopened like a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, of course, yeah.
The end of March, I think. He worked in sales and management. He's the captain of Scotland's elephant polo team.
I knew there was an elephant polo team.
It's a real thing. You should definitely look it up. It's hilarious. He's the captain.
Yep, love it.
They're pretty good, I think.
Yeah, the Scotland team
They do pretty well.
They have before won the World Championships.
So definitely look that up if you get a minute. Currently, he works with Pernod Ricard Distillers, promoting Scottish whiskey. He got married in 2002, which I thought was quite sad because his dad wasn't there.
Oh.
But he married Eleanor Cadbury.
Cadbury, of the Cadbury fortune.
As in the Cadbury family.
There's only one Cadbury.
Who are responsible for founding Cadbury's chocolate.
Although I feel it's Cadbury's chocolate, and then it's Lady Cadbury.
Oh, I would forgive it because Cadbury chocolate is my favourite.
I do enjoy it.
It's definitely the best. Dairy milk, it doesn't get better than that.
Cream eggs, ooh.
If you're American, you're really missing out.
You are.
I can't even describe to you how much better Cadbury's is than Hershey's. I'm sorry. Hershey's has no flavour.
Kicks ass.
Cadbury is just, it's where it's at. I kind of missed getting a Cadbury like Easter egg this year.
Yeah, that's true.
Would have been nice.
Would have been a good time.
And Cadbury definitely kicks Mars's ass.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
It's a nicer chocolate.
I do love a Mars bar.
I like Mars confectionery, but Cadbury chocolate is superior in flavour.
Yep, can't argue with a Cadbury. Well, good for him. That's a good marriage to get locked in, isn't it?
All the chocolate you could ask for.
I know.
It's like Willy Wonka. No?
I bet he got a good Easter egg.
Oh. If he didn't, I'd be sad.
Do you think it's like room-sized? Or do you think she's just like, oh, don't talk to me about chocolate?
Probably. Oh, I don't touch the stuff. So that's the history of Inveraray and the Campbells.
Of course, because contemporary, or the very recent past, they're usually pretty low-key because they don't talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, that's it. They have children, but they're currently still children, so I don't really want to talk about them. That's not fair.
No.
Yeah, that's the history. As far as ghost stories go, Inveraray is a little lean.
Oh, yeah?
I have to be honest. I have some for you, you'll be pleased to hear, but the history is definitely more bloody than the ghost stories would suggest.
That's fair. Well, I mean, of all the story and the many massacres and everything that's gone on, not a lot has gone on at the castle.
In its new location.
I thought the castle was in the same place, but they moved the town.
Oh, well, they rebuilt it. I think it moved a bit.
But it'll move a little bit.
Like on its own, like land.
Okay.
I do have some ghost stories.
Hit me up.
If you would care to hear them.
Spook me up, Scotty. Or beam me up, Spooky.
Beam me up, Spooky.
That probably makes more sense.
It's fun to say. The most famous ghost is the ghost of a little boy. An Irish boy who's also a harpist.
Oh.
So another harp.
Another harp. 2 harps in one day.
I think an Irish harp is different.
Is it more of like a handheld?
I think it's smaller.
Yeah.
I think it's a different type of harp. But if I'm wrong on that, please tell me. That's totally fine.
Harping on again over there.
I'm always harping on. It's my whole job. That's what I get paid to do. When the 8th Earl of Argyll was on the run from Montrose, that whole saga from last week, the Earl had to flee Inveraray Castle quickly to get away, remember?
Yep.
He had to flee to Newcastle and escape. The Earl managed, but the young boy was left behind in the castle. In the rush. He didn't escape. And Montrose's men were supposedly made up of Irish mercenaries. And that's who he had called on to fight as part of the royalist cause. They were so angry that an Irish boy was in the service of Argyll when they discovered him, they killed him.
Wow.
They dismembered him and apparently left his remains on the Earl's bed.
That's grim.
Yeah. Supposedly.
Supposedly.
So now the boy's ghost supposedly haunts Inveraray Castle.
If ever there's a good reason for a ghost, that's a good reason for a ghost.
And this would have happened before the new castle was built. But the story is that the boy is attached to the bed that he was left on, not the castle. And the bed was moved from one castle to the other.
Interesting.
And if you visit Inveraray Castle, the bed is in the MacArthur room. The legend goes that when one of the Campbells is about to die, you can hear harp music playing in that room.
Oh, it's like a banshee.
Yes, which is a partly Irish legend.
Oh.
But this apparently happened in 1949 when the 10th Duke died.
Wow.
They heard harp music playing.
That would creep you out for life, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't want to sleep in there.
No. Wouldn't want to sleep in that castle if you heard that.
I wouldn't want to keep that bed.
Yeah, that's true. If it was linked to the bed, you just get rid of the bed.
Oh, just knowing that happened with it, I'd be like, ooh, no.
Get a priest to bless it and then set it on fire or something. I don't know.
Just get a futon instead.
Get a going. There's got to be a lot of bedrooms.
Get a Murphy bed, you'll save space. Yeah, I found this one really interesting because of the relation to Banshee legends and the fact that there is this Irish connection. The fact that if this is true, this little boy, this ghost, is performing the function of a banshee.
Yeah.
I found that really intriguing.
Absolutely. There's a lot of scope for interesting stories about the child being transformed into a banshee.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
There were lots of layers to it.
Was it the piper at Culzean Castle who did the same thing?
I believe so, down in the caves.
I think so. Piped when somebody was going to die? I
think so. There's lots of piping ghost legends. And they usually have that kind of flavour to them, which is interesting because this is a harp.
Yeah. Served up piping hot.
So it has another connection to that traditional legend, which I find interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think it was when the laird is going to die or someone's going to die. Cool. We're actually going to talk about something similar to that in our finale.
Ooh.
A little teaser for you. There's another ghost that has been seen around Inveraray Castle. And this is the Grey Lady.
Okay.
But apparently she's only ever been seen by, quote, daughters of a Duke of Argyll.
Oh.
Quote. No one else has ever seen the Grey Lady apart from daughters within the family.
Last time we were talking about ghosts, I was upset that there wasn't a colour of lady haunting. So
We have one.
fills that gap.
I've made up for it.
Yep. That's new though. That's a new caveat to it.
Right?
Ooh. Does she warn them about men?
I don't know. It's a tricky one because the ones who've seen her, they don't really know why she's there. She doesn't appear at certain times. She just appears to certain people. It's only ever to women. One of the reasons put forward for who she is and why she's there is that she was murdered by Jacobites during one of the risings. But other than that, no one really knows anything about her. And she's only seen by daughters of the family.
That's funny. Not someone you could go and check out yourself.
Spooky.
Spooky though. I like it. I like the little extra detail that only some people can see her. And that's fun.
And then it stays consistent.
Yeah.
Because it's a Scottish castle, you won't be surprised to hear that people have heard a piper playing.
There you go. Yep.
They've heard pipe music, but they've heard a piper in the library of the castle.
Bit random.
Strange place to hear pipe music. But one of the things that lends it some authenticity to me is how distinctive pipe music is. You hear that and you know what you're hearing straight away.
Yep.
There's no doubts.
It's odd because normally you have to be quiet in a library. Do you know what's not quiet? Bagpipes.
So loud, especially in confined spaces. Oh my God.
Inside.
It's like a weapon itself.
Yep. But as you said, it's very distinctive. There's not a lot that you could mistake for pipes.
No, I don't think so.
In the way that, there's noises and things like, ooh, there's whistling. Like, well, wind can whistle through.
Have you heard whistling, bumps, knocks? There's lots of different things those could be.
But bagpipes.
You hear pipes playing indoors, you know exactly what that is. If you had to do ceilidh dancing when you were at school in Scotland, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, just how startling that can be.
So I thought that was interesting.
Can you imagine just sitting there reading your book in the library, having a nice quiet moment to yourself with a cup of tea, and then just bagpipes erupt out of nowhere?
You would honestly jump out your skin.
Yeah. It'd be more frightening than seeing a ghost, I think.
It would be so discombobulating. Because if you're too close to a piper inside, it honestly feels like your ears are going to cave in.
Yeah.
And your head's just going to buzz off.
It's just kind of a lot.
And I love pipe music. I love being out and hearing pipe music.
Hearing it from a distance.
I don't like hearing pipe music indoors.
No.
Unless it's small pipes, they're not so bad.
That's true, they can be a bit quieter. But
a full set, like full drones, you're done for.
Done for.
So yeah, people have heard that inside the castle.
That's funny.
And I would tend to believe that they would know that they heard that. Even if you're a tourist, I think you would know.
Yes, yeah. You learn quickly if you did.
I don't mean that as an insult that tourists don't know what they're talking about, but just even if you aren't familiar with pipe music, you would hear that and know.
I think so.
One of the cooler legends, which I know you're absolutely going to love, is the legend of the ghost ship.
Who doesn't love a ghost ship? Come on now.
That's been seen on Loch Fyne.
Oh, yeah.
So if you remember, Inveraray Castle is on the shores of Loch Fyne. So we have a ghost ship.
Ghost ship, people.
An actual ghost ship.
Obviously just missed. Still very cool, though.
I don't know if we've ever talked about a ghost ship before.
No, I don't think so. We've had ghosts seen from a ship, but not a ghost ship in itself.
Well, it's supposedly been seen several times over history. And again, only ever comes ashore when a Campbell chief is about to die.
Ooh.
And people have likened that to it coming ashore to claim their soul for its crew.
I like it. Oh, Davy Jones. Yeah, nice.
But again, another like warning or
Yeah.
omen.
Well, it's going to be pretty noisy when there's a chief about to die, between the kid playing the harp and this boat landing, and then maybe the bagpipes will start playing at the same time.
Lots of fanfare.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of fanfare. And then what if the Duke's just sitting there having his dinner? It's like, oh no.
Uh-oh.
I feel fine though.
Did you put peanuts in this?
So you didn't use tinned salmon, did you?
There's a story that apparently one of the chiefs in the 1700s saw the ghost ship himself and was so scared of angering the ghosts because he didn't feel close to death. He didn't think he was going to die, but he was worried about what they might do if he didn't die, that he opted to drink poison.
Wow.
I think he might have been like saved, but he was so scared of what he saw and of upsetting them that he decided to do that.
Crazy. What could you possibly think you have seen to drive you to drink poison?
Well, yeah, like, even if, like, you know, that's not what he saw. What did he see?
What did he see?
And obviously, like, I don't have all the information to thoroughly back it up. It's a legend. Isn't that wild?
That is very wild. That's also very different. Ooh, so it's lean, but it's intriguing.
Right? I don't have a lot of info. I can't back it all up. But there are some interesting stories about this area. Finally, I have...
Finally, I want to know how you get ghost wood, you know?
Just rub it a bit.
Well, yeah. Oh, as soon as I said it. Ghost timber. You know, a person dies, their soul comes back as a ghost. How does a ship die? You know?
Well, people always refer to ships as her. Maybe they inherently have soul.
They inherently have being.
Or because they meant something to people aboard.
Maybe that was made at a ghost shipbuilders.
Maybe.
That's what I want to know.
Part of your ghost universe.
Yep.
Deciding the rules. How does it all work?
I need my ghost logic nailed down.
How does this operate?
Like a wood on a ghost ship with a ghost nail. Nailed down.
Well, I know I said that Inveraray is quite lean. I have one last story for you, but this one is backed up by witnesses.
Okay, the other one's word.
Well, no, like, officially I have names and dates.
Oh, okay.
For this one. And that's why I've saved it for last. Because I'm hoping that will appeal to you.
Hit me.
William Hart was a doctor who was walking around Inveraray Castle with two other men on the 10th of July, 1758.
Okay.
They recorded this day and they noted the date after what they saw.
I feel that's a very doctory thing to do, to write down the date.
Right. You're with me. They saw a battle.
A battle?
A ghost battle.
Whoa.
Happening in the sky.
In the sky? Whoa. Okay.
There were these three men, and there were two women who also saw the same thing, but they weren't part of this group. They were somewhere else, saw the same thing at the same time. The men watched as the Scots that they could identify were on one side of the battle and seemed to be retreating. They were suffering heavy casualties, they weren't doing well, but they had no idea really what they were looking at. They could just tell the Scots by the kilts and the uniform. Turns out that the Battle of Ticonderoga, or the Battle of Carillon, happened in New York 2 days before this ghostly sight.
Oh.
And the Scots, who were fighting the French in this battle, lost 300 men.
Wow. And they fled across the skies.
Well, it just seemed like maybe these people, they were seeing a repeat or an echo. But they were walking around Inveraray. It had nothing to do with Inveraray.
No.
They had no idea what they were seeing at the time. They went home and noted everything down. The women did the same. They saw the same thing while they were in the town of Inveraray.
Yep.
They had no idea what they saw.
That's wild. I have no idea what that could mean.
No.
I have no answers for that. No smart comments.
The closest that I've heard to that was when we were looking at Culloden and the Tay Bridge actually, where people say that they see like echoes of what happened there, but they're in the place.
Yeah. So to have it happen somewhere else 2 days later is random.
To people who didn't really have a connection, they had no idea.
No.
They didn't know what they were looking at.
Maybe the doctor had to just put down his ethanol. Just like, that's enough of that for today.
But also, remember, this is the mid-1700s. So these people hadn't heard of the battle happening yet.
Right enough.
So there's no way they would have known about it 2 days later.
Interesting. Well, that's piqued my curiosity.
Right?
Because it's one thing confusing mist for a ghost ship. I don't think that's...
Well, we talked about that in our Hugh Miller episode. Where, remember, they were seeing like shapes on the hill.
Oh, yeah.
In the fog. Mm-hmm. And it was trees coming out of the mist that looked like ship's masts sailing on a misty sea.
Yeah.
So we have talked about this before.
We've talked about that. But to look at some clouds and be like, oh, that one looks like a cat. Oh, that one looks like a 300-person strong Scottish army retreating from the enemy. Sorry, which cloud did you just look at?
And they could distinguish the two sides.
Yeah.
They could see the uniforms with enough clarity that they were distinct. And they knew that these were Scottish men.
Mm.
And they knew that the battle was going poorly.
Mental. Just goes to show you, if you're looking for ghosts, you should write down the date.
Well, I feel like it makes it more compelling.
I think so.
This is a doctor who saw what he saw and saw the sense in writing it down after he saw it and dated it.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
And there's no way he could have known about that battle.
No. Weird. Mm-hmm. That's weird and wonderful.
And I was prepared because in my notes I have, you can scoff if you want to, Kieran.
Good.
But a study was carried out across Argyll, so it's an area of Scotland, and it turns out that it is the best part of the UK to see a ghost.
Oh, yeah?
For every 10,000 people in Argyll, there were 12 ghost sightings.
Wow.
And this is the highest rate for anywhere in the UK.
That's really funny.
I thought you'd want to know.
I do want to know that. Interesting.
Yep, it's the most haunted part of the UK.
Huh. Statistically speaking.
And if that wasn't good enough, most haunted have investigated Inveraray Castle.
Have they?
So it is definitely 100% haunted because they had a book thrown at them, which was definitely 100% legit.
Oh, and definitely not just Carl off screen throwing it. God, I hate it and I love it. Oh. So bad. So stupid.
But you've watched like 6 seasons.
Watched so much of it because I'm a masochist, apparently.
And I want it noted that it's not me making you. There's been a lot of times where you've decided to put it on.
Yeah, I just usually like towards October I'm just like, want some shit TV, but some shit spooky TV.
That it wasn't me.
I volunteered. I think I was insane.
But that is the monster history of the Campbells of Inveraray Castle.
Whoa. Well done you.
Aww.
That was a journey you took us on. On behalf of all the listeners, we're exhausted.
Yeah, I don't blame you. If you want to take a break, just not listen to us for a while, I understand.
6 hours to get through that.
That's why we split it.
Did anyone... Oh, has anyone like marathoned it? Has anyone sat and listened for 6 hours?
All power to you if you have.
Yeah, good work.
That's an awful lot of our rambling.
Well, that was a journey. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening.
You're very welcome.
Because it is a monster.
It is a monster.
And the best part for if you're listening at home is this counts as one episode.
Yeah,
you're still getting 10 this season.
Mm-hmm. You've got episode 7, 8, 9, 10 to come still.
Yeah. And who knows how many there are going to be.
It's never going to end.
I have so much freedom now that we can split them into parts.
I know.
You've unleashed the beast. I can do what I like. I have so much freedom. So much time.
Eilidh's power is endless, boundless.
Too much power.
Too much power.
Too much power for such a small person. But I love it.
Fear her. Well, I have some notes for the blether.
Yes, we're going to take this over to Patreon and we're going to break it down.
Yeah, we are. Thank you so much for listening. Rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it.
It does really help us. I know it seems like a minor thing. It only takes a minute, but it really helps. I can't even tell you how much.
Yep. And thank you to everyone who has, of course.
Yes, we appreciate you. We do read them.
We do read them.
And we take on your feedback. So if there's things that you want us to get better at, that's fine.
Let us know over there. And get your Labelle Rebelle merch at generallyspooky.com.
It's so great, you guys. You're going to love it.
You can see the bingo card. And we'll be back for episode 7.
A new tale. No more Campbells just for now. There may be more in the future. I don't know.
It better not be Campbell related. Better not be.
It's not, from what I remember.
Oh, we'll need to wait and see.
It is... Next week's episode is truly gothic in nature.
Okay. Interesting. Doesn't mean much to me. Mean anything to you at home? We'll wait and we'll find out. Bye.
Bye.